Welcome to the Tipping Point Show. I'm Jimmy Evans. We have a great show for you today, and Mark Hitchcock will be joining me here in just a minute. We're going to be talking about some issues in the news. There is a growing rift between the Biden administration and the Netanyahu administration. This is increasingly in the news, talking about just some hostility that exists between President Biden and Prime Minister Netanyahu and the pressure that we're putting on them to stop the war in Gaza and also to enter into a two-state solution. This is a big issue that Mark and I are going to be talking about. We're going to be talking about NATO. We're going to be talking about Jordan. We're going to be talking about different things that are happening that you need to know about. We're also going to be answering some questions. We're going to be answering a question about, could the Antichrist be Islamic? This is a big deal. It's a big question that needs to be answered. We're also going to be talking about China. Could China be the 200 million man army talked about in Revelation chapter 9? We're going to be talking about the false messiahs. Jesus said false messiahs would come before he came again, and we're going to be talking about, is that true? Wouldn't Israel need a more orthodox government in order to move forward with rebuilding the temple and the sacrifices? We're talking about that. And also, since the U.S. is judged related to Israel in a two-state solution, doesn't God also judge Saudi Arabia and other nations in a similar manner? So we'll be talking about things in the news and also be answering questions. Welcome to...
Yeah, great to be with you as always. Thank you.
Well, we got some big stuff to talk about here. You know, I keep thinking that something, will kind of back off related to Israel, but it never does. It just keeps ratcheting up. And there's so many different fronts on that. You've got some articles, and I've got a couple articles we're going to talk about. And I want to begin. This comes from the Jewish News Syndicate, and this is from February 11th. And the headline here is, Disagreements Over War Driving Biden Toward Breach with Israel. And let me just read just a little bit of this. It says, disagreements over the war against Hamas are driving United States President Joe Biden toward a breach with Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, who he believes can no longer, and this is, quote, be influenced in private, close quote. The Washington Post reported on Sunday, citing insiders in Washington, quoting 19 senior administration officials and outside advisors. The newspaper said that Biden's mounting frustration with Netanyahu has led some White House aides to suggest that the president ramp up public criticism of the Israeli Defense Forces operation in the Gaza Strip. Now, it goes on here to talk about, Biden is calling Netanyahu privately some very vulgar things. And they're saying privately he's absolutely furious with Benjamin Netanyahu. So there have been several reports that we are looking at withholding arms shipments to Israel. And they are absolutely desperate for arms shipments from us to fight this war. So there's this growing tension, and the tension exists because we are asking them to do two things that they simply are not going to do. We're asking them to stop the war in Gaza, to a ceasefire and to stop. And they're dedicated to, eradicating Hamas. The second thing we're pressuring them to do is enter into a two-state solution and to give up, the West Bank and East Jerusalem, which again, they have repeatedly said they're not going to do that. So I want to get your comments on that. The other thing I want to say is this is a broader issue. I've always thought, when I was studying Bible prophecy, that when the Antichrist stepped onto the world scene, it would be just like this. That there would just be this impasse between Israel and the rest of the world, and that there would be this answer man that steps on the scene. Of course, we have no idea when the Antichrist is going to show up. But I'm saying, what do you think about this situation and just the, world tension related to Israel?
Well, you're right. It's kind of at the worst it's ever been. In the past, 1973, Richard Nixon, we basically saved Israel in the Yom Kippur War, sending the arms that they needed to save them. So, yeah, I think, Israel today is that burdensome stone that Zechariah talks about, that no one can lift. I think the word used is really good. There's an impasse there. And so even the United States, who's been the closest ally and friend of Israel, many people are calling on the Congress to make Israel make all kinds of concessions, then to receive arms and to receive aid, which we've never placed these strings on that before. And so I think hopefully in the Senate and the House there are enough supporters of Israel there that some kind of aid package can be passed, and that President Biden can be forced to sign that and not veto that. But I think President Biden is getting all kinds of pressure from the left flank of his party. Yeah. To bring an end to this, however it takes place, whatever concessions Israel has to make. But here we have Israel right now with all of the Palestinians basically and Hamas kind of cornered down there in Rafah. And when they kind of have victory in their grasp, and they're being told now, right when you have victory in your grasp, you have to back off and end this. And so just militarily, it makes no sense whatsoever. And it is a terrible humanitarian crisis. No one's going to debate that. But humanitarian crises come from war. And when you start a war, there's going to be a lot of humanitarian crises from that. And Israel knows they have to get rid of Hamas. There can't be a two-state solution with Hamas. Yeah. So, what President Biden's asking them to do, they won't do it. And so the question then will be, will America still support Israel in the midst of this? So, and we're going to talk on a little bit, King Abdullah has just visited, the United States, and he's throwing his weight behind all of this. And he's actually he's going to go to Canada and several other nations as well, and, pitching what he wants. So it's going to be interesting to see how it all pans out. But I think Netanyahu is going to stand firm in this and keep going because he realizes they have to.
It's just an undoable situation, and the thing is, Mark, we know how it's going to end. The thing about Bible prophecy is we know that ultimately the world is going to march against them. I mentioned on something I did on Monday that the special reporter for the United Nations, an employee of the United Nations, has again denounced Israel and said that the Jewish people who were killed on October 7th were not killed because they were Jewish, but because they were oppressors. And this is the world position related to Israel is, in spite of what Hamas did on October 7th, that they're oppressors and they have to be eradicated. The view of, I think, most Muslims and most Arabs is the state of Israel has to be eradicated. Now, you've got an article there, too.
Well, yes, I thought we'd kind of maybe move over to the King Abdullah. He just was at the White House. I know you have something on that, some things on that as well. But that was really interesting, because Jordan is one of the two nations before all the Abraham Accords came about that has peace with Israel. Egypt in 1979 and then Jordan in 1994. And Jordan has the jurisdiction over the Temple Mount. Now, Israel has soldiers up there, but they have jurisdiction over that. The Waqf has, leadership there. So, Jordan's a key player in this. They're not a powerful country. They don't have a powerful military. They don't have oil assets, but they're a key player. But I thought it was interesting. King Abdullah, he did do one thing that most others haven't done. He did criticize Hamas's October 7th terror onslaught in southern Israel. So that's one thing that he did right, and I want to give him props for that. Yeah. He's one of the few Arab leaders who's done that. Yeah. But then, it kind of gives on one hand and then kind of takes away on the other hand. He says that, there has to be a 6-week ceasefire, which again, right when Israel's got victory kind of in their grasp, they have to stop. Which we wouldn't do that. We wouldn't want another nation telling us how to run a military operation. And the other thing is, and this is just like on a loop reel over there. They just over and over again, a two-state solution, but not just a two-state solution, but pre-67 borders. Which means then, of course, Israel in 1967 took the Sinai Peninsula. That in 1979 was given back to Egypt. They took the West Bank and Gaza. That's been given to the Palestinians. And they took the Golan Heights, which Israel still has control over. And Israel cannot give up control of the Golan Heights. Anybody who's been to Israel, that's the high ground right there to the east and a little to the north of the Sea of Galilee. It's a strip of land 40 miles long and 12 miles wide. In Israel, if they give back the Golan Heights, they're going to be committing national suicide. They can't give it back. And so, that's a non-starter for Israel. And we have to remember those borders back that were established in 1948 called the Green Line really weren't the borders of nations. They were just placed really there by the United Nations as just kind of placeholders. And Israel is not going to go back to pre-1967 borders. They may at some point in time be open to some kind of two-state solution. But the problem is with all of this is there was a two-state solution in 1948. There were borders that were drawn, and Israel accepted the two states, and the Arabs did not. They attacked Israel in 1948. Five nations came against them.
That's right.
And they've never accepted that, and Israel has. And so it's a lot of revisionist history. But again, I'll give props to King Abdullah for saying that that October 7th was bad, was an atrocity. But again, he's going to be going around the world pushing this two-state solution, pre-67 borders. That's their diatribe, that's their line, and they're sticking with that. And America cannot be pushed into a place where we push Israel to do that. Because Israel can't do that, and as long as they have the government they have now, they won't do that.
Well, a couple of things. One is, people need to understand, if the Palestinians become a state, a recognized state. Now, the Biden administration is saying it would not be militarized. Well, Mark, anytime Iran has the opportunity to pump weapons in, they're going to do it, just like they did with the Gaza. So, number one. But number two is, if they become a state, all the Jews have to leave. They have about 500,000 Jews in the West Bank, 200,000 in East Jerusalem. All those Jews have to leave. They lose their homes. Okay, that's number one. Number two, and you said it right, there was a two-state solution offered in 1948. The Jews accepted it, the Arabs didn't, and they all, surrounding nations, attacked Israel in their war for independence. The reason for the 1967 Six-Day War is they were using the West Bank, they were using East Jerusalem, they were using Gaza, and they were using the Golan Heights to attack Israel all those years. And so Israel took that ground to keep from being attacked, and the Sinai Peninsula. So Israel took all that land to protect themselves. Now, what we're saying, even after Hamas, and I said this, I think I said it last week on the show, but Mark, there's only 5% of the Arab population in the Middle East that supports Israel being a nation. 95% want Israel wiped out. And in an election today, Hamas, they're rock stars. See, we see Hamas as terrorists and thugs and all that. In the Arab world, they're rock stars. And what they're saying is, if a free election was held today in the West Bank among the Palestinians, they would elect Hamas to be their leaders. But not the Palestinian Authority. They want Hamas. So what we're saying right now, and this is how Israel hears this, the Palestinians do not want Israel there. Benjamin Netanyahu said the only difference between Hamas and Fatah and the Palestinian Authority isn't whether we should exist. They all want to get rid of us. It's just how to get rid of us. Okay, the Hamas is just more in your face, kill the Jews. But the Palestinian Authority, they want a state, and then they want to use that statehood to get rid of Israel, to do what they've done before. So what we're asking them to do historically is insane. It's insane. And it just completely ignores October 7th.
Well, they view themselves, and they're viewed in the Arab world, as freedom fighters, not as terrorists.
That's right.
Israel's oppressors, they're occupiers. In fact, King Abdullah, when he's there at the White House, referred to Israel's with the West Bank and with Gaza as a 70-year occupation.
Yes.
So even King Abdullah, who's the most moderate leader in the Arab world, says it's a 70-year occupation. So they're occupiers, so they can be pushed out. Really, when you think about this, though, the last thing that Palestinians should want is their own homeland, a two-state solution, because once they're recognized as a nation, if they do anything against Israel, then Israel can wipe them out.
Yes. Yeah.
Because it's a nation versus a nation.
Yeah.
So really what they're asking for is not really in their own best interest either, I don't think. They see it that way. But, now they can kind of plead this idea that we're being occupied, we're being oppressed. Once they have their own nation, that argument goes away.
I didn't think about that.
And then, and Israel could then, because when a nation attacks another nation, then you obviously can go defeat them. So, they're really, what they're doing, it's against their own interest, but it just shows again, the satanic nature of all this. Yes. It's confused, it's chaotic. There's one driving force behind this, and that is a hatred of the Jewish people. And we just see it manifested in all these various ways.
I was at Washington embassy, the Jewish embassy, Israeli embassy in Washington, watching 45 minutes of the raw footage of October 7th, which was absolutely horrific. And the pastor sitting next to me in the middle of the video leaned over to me and said, you have to be demon possessed to do what those people are doing. And the worst barbarism you can possibly imagine. It's a demonic hatred. That's what anti-Semitism is. So I've got this article too about King Abdullah, and it says, this is from the Jerusalem Post. This is Biden, during his remarks, recognized the Hashemite kingdom's special role as the custodian of the holy sites in Jerusalem. King Abdullah also spoke of Jerusalem and Al-Aqsa Mosque compound of the Temple Mount as he warned against Israel actions at that site, which is the holiest one in Judaism, the third most sacred site to Muslims. And the reason that I picked this article out, those particular remarks, is Israel's getting nothing. There's no concessions related to the Temple Mount. In other words, they're saying, Jordan, you're the custodian of the Temple Mount. Israel, you stay off the Temple Mount. You get no concessions on the Temple Mount. You get no concessions related to Gaza. Give Gaza back. Let the Palestinian Authority run it. Enter into a two-state solution. And pre-1967 boundaries, Israel gets nothing out of the deal except to be forced into a situation that empowers their enemies. That's all it is. And Hamas, if they stop now, Hamas will reconstitute. And they're already reconstituting in the West Bank, I believe. But it's just something that when you look at it, Israel gets nothing, everybody else gets something, Israel gets nothing. And again, I want to say that I don't know when the Antichrist is going to come, but it just seems today, Mark, that if an answer man stepped on the scene with some kind of a brilliant solution, he would be lauded by the world. If you can crack that nut in Israel, you would get the Nobel Peace Prize for the next decade.
Oh yeah, it's the diplomatically and world related, it's the Gordian knot. And he's going to come and he's going to solve that, and that is what's going to launch him and catapult him on to the world scene. What you mentioned though about Israel, 1967, they took the West Bank, they took Gaza, they took the Temple Mount, they took the Sinai Peninsula. They've given all that back. Egypt has the Sinai Peninsula. Palestinians have West Bank and Gaza. East Jerusalem is in Muslim hands. Again, the only thing they've kept is the Golan, the Golan Heights. And then, but whatever concessions they make, it's never enough. If you go back to pre-67 borders, we know in the Hamas charter, it's from the river to the sea. It's to destroy Israel. So there's not any kind of agreement for land that can ever be reached that will be satisfactory to the other side.
That's exactly
because it's not an issue about land. It's an issue of existence. The very existence of Israel is the issue. It's not an issue of how much land they have.
Absolutely. Hope you're enjoying the show today. Listen, you can get the entire Tipping Point show without ads. Also, everything else we do all week long on endtimes.com for $7 a month. Become a subscriber. You need this information, such a critical time in human history for us to understand what is going on in light of Bible prophecy, to stay encouraged and educated in these critical times. Become a subscriber for $7 a month.
And this is kind of shifting gears a little bit, but we've been hearing a lot here recently about the EU and NATO. President Trump's made some statements recently about NATO and how the nations there aren't contributing enough. But one of the things that's happened as a result of Russia's invasion of Ukraine is that Europe has been getting stronger. There's an article that I've got here from Reuters, or from World News. It says, here's what to know about Sweden's bumpy road toward NATO membership. And so you have the EU. There's 27 nations in the EU. There are 31 nations currently in NATO, and Sweden, when they're added, will be number 32. But after when Russia invaded Ukraine, both Finland and Sweden couldn't get to NATO headquarters fast enough to apply for membership, because Finland has a long border with Russia. And what's fascinating is, for Sweden, 200 years they've ruled out seeking NATO. They've been neutral. They've stayed out of all these things. But Finland was admitted last April to NATO. Sweden was held up by Turkey, because everybody has to agree. Turkey and Hungary were both holding that up. Well, Turkey now has agreed. They believe Hungary will agree here very quickly. So Sweden will be the 32nd nation to be admitted to NATO. And so Europe really is getting stronger. And I know, people used to hold this view, and a lot of people have abandoned, but I still believe that there's going to be a reunited Roman Empire, a revived Roman Empire, because in Daniel 2, you have those empires of Babylon, Medo, Persia, Greece, and Rome. And then the Roman Empire, you have the historic Roman Empire, kind of Rome 1. And then Rome 2 is going to be a form of the Roman Empire ruled over by 10 leaders. I don't think that the 10 horns there are 10 nations, but they're 10 rulers, because the Antichrist is a little horn, and he's an individual. So those 10 horns are also individuals who will kind of lead this reunited Roman Empire. And we see a lot of ascendancy now of Europe. There's another article put out by AP I just read yesterday. It said, leaders pledge to make Europe stronger. So Germany and Poland and France have met to try to make Europe stronger in light of what's happening in Russia in their invasion to Ukraine, and obviously believing if they're able to take Ukraine, that they're going to then move on from there. So Russia's invasion there of Ukraine has really served to strengthen Europe and NATO and the EU and these different institutions that are there. And I think that's significant. My view is the Antichrist will rise out of the reunited Roman Empire. Again, that encompassed a lot of countries. It doesn't mean he just has to come from Europe, but he'll come from a reconstituted Roman Empire. And so I think that's significant that they're becoming much stronger, and their ties with one another are being cemented even further.
Mark, there is a very clear emerging war between the East and the West. And it's already a silent war, kind of a Cold War. There was the report that China has been trying to prepare to have all kinds of cyber attacks against the infrastructure of the United States. We know they're our enemy. They're our number one enemy in the world. But you have Russia, China, Iran, and North Korea that make up kind of the power block in the East. But then you have the United States, you have Europe, Great Britain, France, Germany, all of these other nations that make up the West. And the West is more powerful than the East, I believe, right now, if it came down to it. So the East, though, and I have a question that we're going to answer here in just a minute about China and the 200 million man army in Revelation. But there is this growing tension between the West and the East, and exactly what you just said. Sweden becoming a member of NATO, that's a huge deal to Russia, and it really surprises me just a little bit that Turkey voted yes for that, because Turkey's so close to Russia. Because I know it makes Russia angry that they would support Sweden coming in.
Yeah, but I just saw the other day, there's an article too, where there's a lot of military sales of arms now going to Turkey from the United States.
Oh.
And so that just kind of came up, and there was no statement that was connected to Turkey voting for these. Yeah. You see Turkey approves Sweden or Finland last spring, and now they've approved Sweden, and then there's a little bit of time goes by, because they don't want people to think it's kind of a one-to-one, and then all of a sudden you see we're selling Turkey all these arms. So there's a lot of things that went into that, I think, to get Turkey to agree to that. But they were really holding out on Sweden, and Hungary was as well. But it seems like they've both given their approval. But especially Finland, they have a border with Russia that's, hundreds of miles long. And so this is infuriating Russia. But again, it's just more of this setup, like you're talking about, of the antagonism and drawing the lines between East and West.
We're going to go on the subscriber portion now, where we're going to be answering some questions. And we have some really fantastic questions here. We're going to be talking about, is the Antichrist Islamic? Is China the 200 million man army in the book of Revelation, chapter 9? And some more questions like that. So stay tuned right now for the subscriber only portion. If you're not a subscriber, Bye.